Hello, and welcome to the Mobile User Acquisition Show, a podcast to help you unlock tremendous growth for your app. My name is Shamant Rao. I'm the CEO of the boutique growth marketing firm Rocketship HQ and host of the podcast Mobile User Acquisition Show. In each episode, we feature experts in the field of mobile growth and discuss strategies, tips, and pointers from the leading edge of mobile growth marketing. By the end of each episode, you will have gained actionable and tactical insights that will help you make more informed decisions in your own work around growth. The Mobile User Acquisition Show is produced by Meryl Vincent, Content Marketing Manager at Rocketship HQ.
Our guest today is Todd Kane, the VP of Growth at Homer Learning, a company that operates a suite of apps for kids. Today's episode is fascinating because kids' apps have had to face privacy restrictions much before ATT, and Todd explains how he and his team have been ahead of the game by moving over to web-based flows and strategies for the user flows, which has addressed the issues of tracking losses as well as unlocked access to a wider pool of users than they would have had access to if they had only targeted mobile app-based flows alone. Todd explains the mechanics of everything his team tested in the process of switching over to web-based flows and shares how they unlock traffic and scale on the web to address the limitations of Apple's privacy policy changes. I'm excited to welcome Todd Kane to the Mobile User Acquisition Show. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Real honored to be here.
Todd, so thrilled to have you because, obviously a lot of the iOS changes have been far-reaching for a lot of marketers, but you guys have been very much ahead of the curve in many ways. And you guys have adopted many strategies, especially the web-based flows, which we will dive into today. So I'm excited to dive into all of the things that could potentially help a lot of folks deal with some of the mess that we are all in with iOS changes. To set the stage, you and your team work with kids apps. Can you give us a background of how the privacy landscape is different for kids apps as compared to other apps?
Yeah, great question. And again, really excited to be here. So thank you. Again, so the kids category overall is ruled by an additional body under the regulations of COPPA, which basically is there to increase the protection of the child from any sorts of advertising. The impact of that for us happened well in advance of iOS 14.5 and impacts of ATT, where they required in late 2020 that all apps who are focused on kids products have to remove all IDFA completely from the app itself, regardless of if you're collecting information or not. The requirement from Apple was that basically the next big update or any update you did to push to the App Store, if you collected any IDFA inside the app, it would be pushed back and not be allowed. So we had to, which includes all of the MMPs such as AppsFlyer and our ability to track marketing performance and scale day-to-day business. So for us, the challenge ahead of us, and I know we're going to talk about that, was really how do we react and adapt into a world that is which was at that point relatively unknown of if and when the modifications for kids-friendly IDFA-free gays would be available for industries and categories such as ourselves, which really led to the strategy that we're going to talk about today, which was developing and focusing more on web. So tons of regulation. Nuance in our product is naturally the consumer is twofold. The buying consumer is the parent. The user is the child inside the app, which is kind of causes that complexity.
Sure. And these are complexities that most other apps don't have to deal with at all. Right. Yeah. And I know you said, look, because of a lot of the regulatory and sort of privacy related stuff, you guys started looking at web-based flows. What was the genesis of the idea to look at the web-based flows? What were some of the assumptions that are inherent in this planning?
Great question. So some of it, or a lot of it, really came out of need, right? We knew that the future of a company who was 95% mobile app focused and 95% of that being within iOS in terms of UA was undefined moving forward, right? And we still need to really help grow our business and be thoughtful of continuing to serve our customers. At the time and historically, we had a very small amount of spend and eyes on our kind of web business, like most mobile app businesses had. But the belief and the data points that we saw are like the proof points that made us super excited around just the opportunity and ambition to really supersize the web-based marketing efforts were threefold. One, the ability to improve our margins and our net CLTV, since we're no longer paying that 30% Apple tax, since that full acquisition happens in the web. Two, from the data points that we had, in general, the kind of cohorts of customers on web had a much healthier CLTV for us against iOS and Android users. So really healthy market there. Third, really offers our ability to move past just selling someone an individual singular monthly or 6-month or 12-month subscription, but the opportunity to really drive more ARPU or revenue per user at time of purchase through cross-selling and bundling. And I guess there is a fourth one, which is pretty exciting, that really unlocks certain marketing channels that in a traditional mobile app space were just usually part of that repertoire. So the ability for us to really grow and scale those channels that we had a ton of belief in. I know we're going to talk about that too, not to sound too ambiguous in that statement. Always like the genesis of our kind of excitement. And from where we weren't starting from a pure, we don't have a website, let's start this project mentality. There was some work and some time in terms of a very baseline experience and funnel and quiz that allowed us to at least have a starting point that was beyond just the starting line in terms of that journey. But naturally, lots of change to really help supersize and focus on that as a strategy, which is very different in terms of just the visibility and accountability around driving a mobile app business.
Yeah, right. And as you pointed out, there were like very different reasons that were and opportunities right there that were inherent. And you guys were also not starting from completely from scratch. So I think that definitely would have helped. Right. I know you briefly talked about how parents and the parents involved in kids apps as well. Can you help us understand how the user journey involves parents and kids and how that impacts marketing related decisions? Can you speak a bit to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our world is uniquely complex where we really have two users that are equally important. From a user journey perspective, we're advertising to the parent who, is going through the onboarding funnel and quiz, either in-app or on web, and signing up for a trial that then leads to a subscription 30 days later. After that experience, and either on the web, the customer downloads the app and signs in, or continues their journey in app to kind of start their free trial experience. That is really where the customer becomes a duality, where it's really the child who is the end user for this product, right? And using the product every single day, but the parent's the one whose credit card is being charged. So our jobs are, how do we, on one side, create the best kind of content in our category, it's early education, to really, really supersede that value for the child, but also how do we create that right connection to the parent at the same time, who, because of the limitations of IDFA and COPPA, things like push notifications inside the app, because the child at that point is using the app, we can't do. So how do we develop those right touch points, either through SMS or email, to really have that strong connection to the parent, to show really the outcomes and the value that the child is having within the app, while at the same time serving the child at the same time in terms of best in class, learning disciplines inside of it.
Sure. So in many ways, the parent is the decision maker and the child is the user, and and that introduces quite a bit of complexity in how you want to think about this, right? Because ultimately, the initial marketing has to be parent focused, and the product itself and ongoing marketing has to be kid focused, and I think that's where the complexity comes in. And I know you briefly also said that early on the MMPs didn't have kid SDKs that were sort of kids app compliant. What does that mean? Can you help explain that?
Yeah, at the time, basically the app suppliers of the world just hadn't had the moment to make sure that all their SDKs were, there was a version of that was kid friendly and not collecting any IDFA, which was challenge number one of just having something to track inside of our system to go back. The second, which is a larger challenge, is how is the scan network adopted or not adopted? The inability of the usage of IDFA, which is a pretty important data point within that to allow our ability to mature in terms of channel spend and most importantly, visibility and performance of that. Because again, we're not a install-based business. We're really a post-click business in terms of focusing on the most efficient cost per trial. So acquisition for us is beyond important, which again, that kind of ambiguity for us was a big important reason where we're like, on web, we can track everything or close to at the time. So how do we just really double down on what we have in front of our hands versus waiting for the tech and the kind of category to mature, which in some cases still very ambiguous of where it's at and how it's growing within our category.
With Scan, would you say the playing field is leveled between kids apps and other apps, or is that not quite the case?
Not quite the case. It may have gotten to 30% back to its original level in terms of some of the channels that we can spend in, but the importance and value of IDFA within the apps for it to collect back to the scan still supersedes the kind of current state where we are, which is completely IDFA free. So I think there's still a ton of maturity within the category and the technology to catch up to kind of develop and mature past this kind of current stage.
Sure. Right. So because post-scan, a lot of other apps have 30, 40, 50% IDFAs and you guys have 0. And that's the fundamental difference.
Yep.
And, can you also help explain what you mean by a web-based flow? I know we briefly talked about it. Can you describe what that looks like for a user? What are the components? What are the elements of the flow, just so folks understand? Because I also ask this because I think that people say web-based flow, and I think different people can mean different things. So I think it'd be good to help understand how you guys have it architected.
Yeah, absolutely. Our architecture and strategy in terms of our web-based flows, a true end-to-end onboarding experience and purchase cycle that happens within our mobile or inside of our web ecosystem. So a customer comes to our landing page, and because again, we're in the education and kids education space, the ability to really provide that insight and details to the parent in a more long form way allows better education to the parent of what the problem is that we're trying to solve. The customer then, or the parent in this case, goes into an onboarding funnel, which is a combination of some first party data that we collect, such as email and SMS, and then goes through a quiz, which better creates personalization for the child at the end of the day of what they're going to be experiencing and using inside the app through a series of questions that connects back to that kind of onboarding experience of the child. The parent then submits their credit card at the end and puts down their information for that first 30-day free trial, which they only get charged after that trial is done for that first month. And then are greeted with a series of different prompts that allows them to quickly and nimbly download the app, i.e. a QR code, links, as well as a subsequent series of emails and text messages back to the parent to get them to download. And at that point, then they sign into the app, and then the app, in terms of its status and personalization to the parent and what they filled out in that quiz and survey, is set up, and the parent and child kind of begin that experience together.
So that certainly feels very well thought out. And I know, just to go back to something you said earlier, I know you said there are other acquisition channels that get opened up. Can you speak to what those are?
So great question. So some of them are reformats of current channels that we're in. So in the mobile app world, we were heavily using Google UAC, but traditional non-brand and brand search through text ads was not at all a strategy for us. That unlocked, in terms of a web-based strategy, huge opportunity of consumers that we were super excited to bring into our experience. Affiliate, in terms of true and blue commission-based affiliate, was not a program for us that was a large business for us in the traditional mobile app world, but has opened up to become a very large business for us in the web world through that web-based flow and funnel experience. And then other channels, as we think about what's uniquely us in terms of brand ambassadors and building a true kind of influencer network that supports us, was a little bit different in the mobile app space, for our ability to really supersede that and drive them to our web-based funnel has proven incredibly fruitful, especially in terms of that sense of insight and clienteling that a parent would really need to help better understand the education product, because it is so specialized and it is so innately personal to them in terms of their child's education that it's not as easy sometimes as a quick download of a mobile app to start your journey. It's part of that understanding and personalization that's super crucial for that as well.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And of course, the added advantage also is you have complete tracking, as you expressed, right? Because users are completing both the sign up and registration and also the purchase during the web flow. So you are able to see what source they're coming from. You are able to optimize in a way that you just can't on mobile just now, right? Exactly. And are you also, in addition to these channels, are you also running scan or mobile?
Yeah, so mobile has not gone off our plate by any means, but it's changed in terms of its size and complexion for us. What I think I mentioned 95% mobile app is really split down the middle now, 50-50 web versus mobile app, iOS, Android, and the bulk of that still being predominantly iOS. So it's really allowed us to diversify, and as there's unique challenges happening in both spaces, right? With mobile app, tracking in iOS 14, in the traditional world, still iOS 14, what's coming down the lane in terms of cookieless world in 2024, like there's challenges on both sides, but it allows us to kind of thread that a little bit easier. Sure. Maybe not easier, but thread it a little bit more smoothly than if we were just singularly a mobile-based company or singularly just a web-based company.
Certainly, it definitely helps spread out the risk, diversify the risk quite a bit, right? And I would imagine you're running scan on mobile with Facebook and stuff. And because you don't have an IDFA, does Google UAC just not work on mobile, or is there a way to make that work?
It depends on the platform. So on Android, it's working completely fine. On iOS, it's non-existent, and similarly to Facebook, which super depends on IDFA and scan to be somewhat useful. The kids category has been pretty hampered by that, at least on mobile app. But again, on web, Facebook's still a nice channel for us to be able to drive and see that performance. So it's a balancing act between the two.
Right. So from what you're saying, on Facebook with scan, it's possible to run, but not quite very well. Or did I mischaracterize what you just said?
Yeah, I would say it's especially in the kid space with no IDFA, it's pretty much useless unless you're trying to run a very costly cost per install campaign, which again is not our business. But outside of that, it's kind of downstream signals is basically non-existent, no matter how much you try to prime the pump.
Sure. And other channels on mobile that tend to work well, other than Facebook and Google? I'm just curious because you said you have 50% mobile, 50% web, and iOS is a big chunk. Bring some of the challenges with Facebook and Google. What other channels work and how well? Yeah.
So Apple Search Ads has been consistently phenomenal for us on iOS, and a channel that we continue to focus in and optimize. And it's naturally not just us as you're reading kind of the percent of Apple Search Ad marketing media adoption over the last year and a half since iOS 14 came out. It's taking and superseding kind of all the other subsequent channels. We've also seen some success in terms of some DSPs that we've been able to really focus on and double down on for iOS. But outside that, that's kind of the core fix. And then on Android, again, much smaller part of the whole, but UAC is the large and singular kind of channel that drives our volume there.
Sure. And I think that's in line with what we see on iOS generally broadly across other apps we work with. And I wonder if you also share some of the concerns we have, which is on Apple Search, it works well, but it's just hard to scale. And with the DSPs, we just worry that the probabilistic could get shut down any day, any week now. And I wonder if those are concerns you guys have, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if a marketer's job is diversifying its channel mix and there's no chance to diversify it, that obviously becomes a little bit cumbersome, which is kind of been manifested in two worlds. One, how do we continue to grow our web footprint, right? So if iOS has to become smaller, because of any reason you've kind of inserted, we have an ability to scale up there, right? Which is super important. The other is, depending on our business, and we kind of own and operate a few different mobile apps within the kids space, is an international opportunity, especially for those that aren't language-based, and the ability to kind of focus in on key markets that we know have a really great consumer base, really good LTV, really good match in terms of our consumer and the profile that we want to go after, and spending some capital there to help diversify outside of just in the US particularly is an angle to support some of that, spreading some of that risk out.
Sure. And I know you described how your web funnel was architected, the different steps and components of that. And I know briefly, Todd, you mentioned when we last spoke that there were a number of tests that you guys ran. Can you speak to some of the tests that you guys ran to improve and optimize the funnel? And also share if there were any surprising wins or surprising failures that came up during this testing process.
Yeah, great question. So our kind of CRO or CVR function is really a staple within our organization, where we believe with conviction of relentless testing and learning and optimization through those tests and experiments, almost at the point of weekly in terms of learning. So the learning curve just keeps moving in terms of hypotheses and things that we really want to improve and really challenge with in terms of our web funnel and the experience providing to parents through that kind of end-to-end journey. A few things that we were super surprised upon was, one, naturally the more zero-party data, first-party data as they call it these days, we can kind of gather, the better. And intuitively collecting email and SMS we felt would probably be important, but certainly believe collecting it in the first step would really hurt the attrition of consumers going through the funnel and deciding to jump away. And found out very surprisingly that actually was helpful, not hurtful in terms of collecting that data. Wow. So our ability, so like that was a big unlock for us, is just consumers, there's a level of trust within our consumers that were really willing to give up their email and SMS, and not for any really incentive besides just wanting to learn more about our business and dig into a little bit more. So, super excited we can collect that first party data or zero party data early on and go through it. It was probably the most surprising, and just we had that permission with the customer, which is different businesses that's usually might not be introduced until like the second to last step, because that's at least the most prime customer in terms of that kind of experience. The other one that I think has been a real exciting challenge and opportunity for us is how do we continue to drive customers to longer term plans and moving them away from monthly into 12-month commitments. And that was a really, a large hypothesis that we had no idea where it would land in terms of us being really moving that needle forward, and found that especially in the web flows, our ability is to really create kind of best in breed CRO, CVR 101 in terms of highlighting and really promoting that monthly plan and how we set that up and how that looks and feels and those dynamics and kind of buttons and all the other things that go along with it has been a huge unlock for web as well, really being able to create more revenue and better LTV from those customers who are joining from our web experience.
Yeah, right. And, it's definitely something that mirrors what I've seen for other subscription apps and other spaces. Like we've done some work with health and fitness apps, learning and education apps. We just see there's just a lot of price inelasticity, I think that's the word, which is people are willing to commit to longer term price plans. People are willing to commit to higher price points. And I think that also speaks to just the fact that the subscription space is just becoming more mature. People are more comfortable with that. And I think that definitely lines up with what you just spoke about, right?
Yeah.
And also just to turn the clock back a little bit, when you and your team were thinking about going down this path of really doubling down on the web-based flows, considering this is and I know you said prior to this, 90% of marketing was app-based. Yeah. So given that this was a completely new direction, how hard was it to get internal buy-in?
To be honest, what I understand, that this kind of even supersedes a little bit of when I even started at the organization, that there really wasn't much of a challenge to it because it had to be done, right? The opportunity cost of waiting versus not moving is pretty strong in that environment. So the buy-in made a ton of sense, and the kind of the KPIs that we were pulling out from just what we saw with a much lower level of spend were super enticing, right? We were like, hey, we think there's a there, and we really want to get after it. I think the organization has been phenomenal of understanding what that looks like in terms of, cover the 101s web-based performance marketing fast page load time and other factors, which if you're not focusing on web are just not a focus. So like to move those things and get them through of like, how do we really develop the baseline playbook from soup to nuts and architecture and SEO and down to page load time, down to developing and building teams exclusively focused on engineering and product features for web is a whole different language. And that's always evolving over the last couple of years of us trying to understand those unique kind of capabilities and how do we resource and support that. But I think that's part of the fun of just this process is a really bootstrap team in some cases, but really focusing in and having so much conviction on the opportunity and really driving it home.
Absolutely. Something you guys have done is grown via M&As quite a bit.
Yes.
How has that informed the broader strategy and planning around growth and marketing?
Yeah, great question. So last year we acquired 3 companies within a 6-month period, as well launched a partnership with a very, very well-known, iconic children's company called Sesame. So the opportunity now is that our TAM, which was really serving kids initially 6 to 9, 6 to 8, really grows now from the age of 0 to age of 12. So we kind of have that full consumer journey of a child in terms of their formal growth process and being able to really supersede their needs based on what they're looking for. The larger opportunity, which kind of goes back to part of the opportunity that really excited us about web, was how do we really use these different properties together to say, how do we bundle these products together to really increase the outcome and value that we're providing parents in terms of this education. We can provide them a singular app as an example, and that's it. Or we can provide them an app with tutoring because they know that their child so needs help on the specific topic. And we can serve that across any of the properties as a singular example of many that make sense. So it fits all together with things that we've learned, things that we've kind of been obsessed on the last 24 months and our excursion and growth in terms of web-based marketing, as well as how do we really supersize kind of the category, the TAM, the ARPU, and the LTV of these customers by really superseding their needs.
Yeah, and I would imagine that also opens up opportunity to cross-promote between these properties. And obviously, a lot of these audiences could be mutually exclusive, but when they're aging out of one app, I imagine that presents an opportunity to cross-promote somewhat seamlessly.
Cross-sells, upsells, bundles, packages, all of those become just a new language for us that this creates a huge opportunity for that. It's the reason why we did it and the reason why we're all, super excited over the next 12 to 24 months with kind of the larger opportunity at hand.
Absolutely. And that obviously takes you guys, out of just a very siloed mobile marketing sort of world, because I think the one thing that I am taking away from this conversation, Todd, is really that I think there's so much value in not looking at mobile marketing as just a single silo in which we're looking at a tech stack that is very mobile specific. And there's huge value in breaking out of that silo to really see where the users are, what's the best way to reach them, even if that way to reach them is not device. Right. And
literally number one concern that was company-wide about focusing on web was that all these customers would come across our website, go through the funnel and decide not to purchase, but just go directly to the app and purchase from there. And I think that was really dissolved day one, as we found that, to your point, there is a whole different customer subset that lives out there outside the mobile app world, at least for our product and category, that's super excited about what we have to offer and are super willing to not only go through a web-based funnel and download an app, but with us, really create some better opportunities of how we can serve them in a larger way.
Yeah, and do you think that in part could be because some of the channels you guys use now are web specific? Like you said, affiliates or search, a lot of these folks are more comfortable with, I would imagine they're more in like a research mode rather than let me download this bouncy ball app now. So, if you're like looking at a rewarded video ad for a hyper casual game, you're in the mood to download something in the next minute and churn in the next 2 days. Whereas I would imagine somebody that's coming into an affiliate site or search is more in like an information research phase. I wonder if that's something you see, or is there something else to this?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on a bit of where they are in the funnel. I think there's always going to be a subset that are kind of top of funnel learning and discovering research phase versus interested and kind of looking around versus deciding to buy, right? The thing I think that this thesis or kind of conversation that, at least we discovered is that there's a lot of ground that our ads just didn't touch the consumers that need to touch the most, right? And maybe not touch the most, but minimally, there's a huge group and audience of customers that we just weren't connecting with and talking about. And to your point, potentially through the channels that were or currently are within the mobile app world, they're just not connecting to them. And that we've found other ways to really find other customers out there and be able to bring them into our kind of story and into our product through this. So I think it really unlocked just the eyeballs that we weren't getting before.
Yeah.
With the channels and the strategy kind of deployed to support it.
Yeah, definitely. And that also lines up with our experience with folks who have done a lot more on native ads like Taboola, Outbrain. That definitely lines up with folks we know that have done that. Again, it may not be right for all products. Like I said, if you have like a hyper casual game, it's just not right for you. You shouldn't, you probably shouldn't do like a Webflow. But I think for the right kinds of products, I think it can be a huge, huge opportunity, as you just described and pointed out about how you guys executed.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, Todd, this has been incredibly instructive. And also just because I think all of us are in this bit of a mess around how to figure out all things iOS just now. And I've certainly taken notes on, just because I do think this is just a huge opportunity and direction for the right kinds of products. This perhaps is a good place for us to wrap, Todd. But before we do that, can you tell us how people can find out more about you and everything you do?
Yeah, easiest way I would say is find me on LinkedIn, Todd Kane, Kane, and you can happily see all the products that our kind of company represents, and or Twitter at Todd Kane, one word.
Wonderful. We will link to all of that in the show notes. For now, thank you so much, Todd, for being on the Mobile User Acquisition Show.
Real honor and privilege. Thank you again.
For more tips, pointers, and strategies from the leading edge of mobile user acquisition, subscribe to our YouTube channel right here, or check out our blog, rocketship.hq.com/blog.